You know, Julie Kelly is one of the great modern-day investigative reporters, really sharp, a lawyer. And she's the kind of person with the kind of integrity and moral center that you would hope would be in the media. But she doesn't work for any of these massive corporate platforms because she doesn't fit their radical left-wing agenda. And she wrote something today, and she's written things before that caught my attention involving the case in Georgia. Julie Kelly, how are you? And what's going on down there?
Good, Mark. Thanks so much for having me on. I mean, this is like a soap opera, really. I mean, between Fani Willis and her involvement in the divorce of Nathan Wade, her lover and estranged husband of Jocelyn, who's now filing motions related to his expenditures of taxpayer dollars that Fani Willis is paying him. And now today, a really explosive hearing, an motions hearing for Jeffrey Clark, one of the several defendants in her RICO indictment, and some bombshell news that came out of that as well. So as we're kind of waiting for the January 6th and Jack Smith trials in Washington and Florida to move forward, both of them are on hold. All eyes are kind of fixated on Georgia, something Fani Willis may not be welcoming at this point.
So what happened that was explosive?
So today during this hearing for Jeffrey Clark, who is the acting assistant attorney general, and as you know, he has been indicted in Georgia. He is one of the unindicted co-conspirators in Jack Smith's indictment in Washington against Donald Trump. Yes, and this man has been, he is a good man, as you know, absolutely vilified.
He's a very good man who they've, again, tried to destroy. Go right ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, the D.C. bar is trying to take away his law license. He is just taking on, assaults from every angle. But today, what his lawyer discovered and what the district attorney, Fulton County DA's office, had to admit to Judge McAfee is that the Biden White House counsel has at least 2 letters that they sent to the DA's office. Now, we don't know what those letters are.
Wow.
Jeffrey Clark's defense counsel wants copies of those letters, and the judge, to his credit, said that he wants to see them under seal, filed under seal, and to see them in camera, as you know, then privately, that he can take a look at them.
And, that's fantastic because, if it were a Chunkin, she'd just blow it off and say, no, that's not relevant or something like that. So that's very, very good. So there's been written communications between the DA and or her lover and the White House. Is that what we learned today? Wow.
We learned that. And I'll tell you, Mark, what was really interesting is the district attorney told the judge, well, we have 1 letter. And the judge, to his credit, McAfee, said, okay, so you're saying text, emails, communications, you have 1 letter. And he said, well, actually, we have 2 letters.
Oh, my God.
And this came, of course, to big news to Jeff Clark and his attorney, who said, we didn't know the basis of requesting any communications with the White House is to help justify a selective prosecution motion, which, of course, Donald Trump has already filed as well in Washington. But this once again, Mark, completely debunks the idea that the Biden White House is hands-off, not just in Jack Smith's 2 criminal indictments against Donald Trump, but now Fani Willis's indictments, which we already know, too, they were in cahoots with the January 6th committee. So this is all a huge conspiracy. We know that Nathan Wade, her prosecutor/lover, was at the Biden White House on at least 2 occasions because he charged Fulton County taxpayers for it. So now we have even more evidence of these interests being in cahoots, despite their public protestations that they have not been.
And then we watch this federal judge in New York. I've never seen anything like this. It says, look, Trump, you're already guilty. And Trump says he has 3 things to say. And then as Trump is trying to finish sentences, the judge says, we're going to strike half that sentence. We're going to strike that sentence. Have you ever seen anything like this in your life?
Well, I'm not. I'm not an attorney. I just follow all of these proceedings.
I mean, congratulations.
No, that's okay, but...
Yes.
I think it helps, actually.
We're here with Julie Kelly. Now, Julie Kelly, this circuit panel in Washington, two truly radical Democrat Party activists who shouldn't be even near a courtroom, let alone sitting on a circuit court, and hearing this issue of immunity post-presidency. If they, in fact, rule against Donald Trump, and if, in fact, that is somehow upheld up the chain, do they even realize how this opens the gates to suing Joe Biden after his presidency for what's going on the border, the people who are being maimed, the people who are being killed, the people whose properties are destroyed, that they will now have the ability to bring a civil suit because this same court ruled that, yes, you can bring civil suits against the president about January 6th. Okay, great. And on the criminal side, immunity doesn't follow him. Okay, I lost my son. He violated the Constitution. He knew he violated the Constitution. My son was murdered by an illegal alien as a result of the policies, the no border policies. So if the next administration wants to look at what Biden has done, they're going to have massive opportunities to charge him, will they not?
They absolutely do. But, Mark, to your point, these judges are not thinking long term. So you have Judge Tanya Chutkan, the Obama appointee, who issued the landmark ruling that concluded that presidents are indeed subjected to criminal prosecution. Now, this is a first. Then her decision went to a 3-judge panel of all Democrat-appointed judges, including Florence Pan, who was appointed by Joe Biden to the district court and then the circuit court. Her husband, Max Stier, is a long-time Democratic
By the way,
Party
I
activist.
read your article on Fox and gave you credit, as well as on here. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark. So Mark Stier, a lot of people know that name, not just because he is a longtime Dem Party activist, but he made accusations against Brett Kavanaugh and went to the FBI and Democratic senators claiming that he saw some incident when they were both freshmen at Yale. He now is fully, openly opposing a second Trump presidency because Donald Trump is going to reform civil service, make a lot of employees appointees of the president, meaning he can fire all of them. And Max Stier, who is married to Florence Pan, who was on this 3-judge panel, she's the one, Mark, who brought up the absurd SEAL Team 6 assassination hypothetical that then has now made all sorts of headlines. So you just know, we're just waiting, for this panel to come back and uphold what Judge Chutkan said, is that Donald Trump can be criminally prosecuted. That, of course, will go to the Supreme Court. But this is a slippery slope.
They may duck it.
They
Supreme
absolutely
Court
may duck.
is a big problem. Sure. I mean, everybody gets excited when they don't take a case. I'd like them to actually rule on the merits at some point and start the process of putting this lawlessness back in the box. Because if they don't, they are creating precedent that they themselves will regret, in my humble opinion. What do you think?
Absolutely. And so there's a very good chance there were 2 Democratic judges, one Republican, Karen Henderson, on the
a Bush judge,
immunity appeal. I'm sorry, correction.
Right.
But if this does go to the Supreme Court, when they ask to grant cert, there's a very good chance the Supreme Court could say no. We're just going to let Judge Chutkan and then the appellate court panel, which we're still waiting for that decision, which we assume will uphold, based on the oral arguments, will uphold Judge Chutkan, and that's the end of it. And then you basically have Democrat judges unaccountable who have now decided for the future of our country that every president can face criminal prosecution for whatever act he conducts in office.
It's just with this guy Smith, who's burned down every boundary, every tradition, and has really opened Pandora's box with the full support and I think backing of Biden and certainly the Attorney General. The Democrat Party doesn't care about the Constitution to begin with as long as it's used against its opponents. That's what we're seeing. And so you have all these quote-unquote issues of first impression where you need courts to make a decision, whereas before there was some level of comity, C-O-M-I-T-Y, and restraint understood by both parties that you don't want to take the country down this road. But these are different times now, aren't they, Julie? It's like, let's burn the damn place down.
They do. And this is the sort of recklessness, as I've called it, watching all of these decisions by these D.C. federal judges, whether they're the district court level, someone like Tanya Chutkan, Beryl Howell, or these circuit court judges. Of course, the D.C. circuit is filled with Democrat and Obama-appointed judges. They don't care, Mark, because they really feel this will only apply to Donald Trump. And it's, and they might be right, because how will you get a D.C. grand jury made of all Democrats to sign off on a criminal indictment against a Democrat president? It's not going to happen.
That's why this whole...
know that they are establishing special rules.
This whole structure, this whole court system structure, I've been arguing in Washington, D.C., needs to be changed, and Congress has the power to do that. It needs to be broken up. It's basically a cabal, and it's way too powerful because of all these federal issues that arise in Washington, D.C., and the federal bureaucracy and separation of powers and the Constitution, and it's really left to a relative handful of judges, the overwhelming majority of whom were appointed by Obama, Biden, some by Clinton, and some appointed, of course, by Republicans, including Trump. And people need to understand at the district court level, often those judges are appointed as part of a deal. There may be 3 judges that Biden wants, and he'll say, okay, I'll give you a Republican, but I need my 2 Democrats, and vice versa. So it's very important to understand. And the other thing is, Julie Kelly, the Senate Judiciary Committee. You not only have Democrats who vote for these people, but you have a solid Republican vote in Lindsey Graham in virtually, I think, every single case, no? Pretty much, yes. You saw little pushback to the appointment of any of these judges, especially Judge Pan, Florence Pan, who was appointed to the district court by Joe Biden, and then a year later elevated to the D.C. appellate court. And so now we're stuck with her, who she is a partisan activist, just like Beryl Howell and just like her husband, Max Stier, making these outlandish hypotheticals from the bench to produce negative headlines against Donald Trump. She has already sided with the district court in piercing attorney-client privilege between Trump and Evan Corcoran, and she upheld the outrageous decision by Beryl Howell and Jack Smith to steal Donald Trump's Twitter files, Twitter data, and not tell him about it. In secret.
And so in secret and keep that under a non-disclosure order, preventing Twitter from telling Donald Trump about the search warrant for 180 days.
And may I add here that Twitter actually took them to court and tried to litigate and said, no, we need to tell him. And they said, no, we don't. But it's a cabal. They control the entire court system from the district court level to the appellate system. So where do you go, right?
Right, the Supreme Court, and they do have some important matters before them. I believe this 1512c2 obstruction of an official proceeding, they're going to review that. Oral argument should be March or April. If they overturn, which they should, how DOJ has intentionally misinterpreted that post-Enron statute, again, Judge Florence Pan, in 2 decisions, 2-1 decisions, upholding how DOJ has flagrantly abused that statute to criminalize political dissent, which represents half of Jack Smith's criminal indictment against Trump for J6. There's Florence Pan once again upholding what the government did. If the Supreme Court reverses Judge Pan and the DOJ's application of that obstruction felony, Mark, it will be such a well-deserved black eye, not just against DOJ, but every federal judge, Trump appointee, Biden appointee, Reagan appointees, and of course Clinton, Obama, who have allowed DOJ to use that statute to make felons out of political protesters.
And of course the concern is that John Roberts and Barrett and some of the others know full well that what you are saying is correct, but they don't want to pay the price of getting these negative news articles and being called, right-wingers and so forth and so on. And so they put their own legacy Robert certainly does, and their own publicity ahead of the Constitution in the country. And this happens more and more and more because you see this juggernaut of the media and the inside the D.C. and the New York and the L.A., elites, not the American people, the masses, but these people, and then the newspapers and the newspaper owners and the TV stations and all the rest, and they're going to dismiss these people, and that's the concern we have. It's not even the Constitution. It is the outside threats and pressure and the reporters and all the rest, don't you think?
Oh, it absolutely is. I mean, as you know, I go to that D.C. courthouse all the time. I cover the hearings. I see what these judges say. I see how they lie about what happened on January 6th. I see how they impose these excessive sentences. Look at Judge Amit Mehta today, an Obama appointee, sentencing Peter Navarro to 4 months in prison for refusing to turn over his records to a bogus congressional committee that now is being accused of destroying their own evidence.
They did.
Judge Mehta expressed no concern over that today in court, but scolded repeatedly, lecturing Peter Navarro for refusing to help the government investigate a terrible day, what he called it, terrible day in American history.
Yeah, terrible day in American history. All these judges are prone to be giving partisan, Democrat, left-wing speeches all the time. Have you noticed that?
I have, Mark, and I posted on X today a lengthy tirade by Royce Lamberth. You and I have talked about him, a Reagan-appointed judge.
Used to be a friend of mine, for God's sakes.
I hope you're not anymore.
I don't talk to him. Of course not.
No.
Go ahead.
He went on a lengthy tirade today, and I posted the entire thing on one Twitter post, denouncing the rewriting of history of January 6th. What a dark day. We're still suffering the consequences, the emotional trauma, he called it, of January 6th, and said in his 37 years he has never seen a criminal act been excused the way that January 6th. And went after Elise Stefanik, didn't name her, but said he condemned people calling J6ers political prisoners or hostages. And this was a totally unwarranted tirade about someone.
Well, let me say this with you there. Excuse me. Let me say this with you there to Royce Lamberth. If you're still psychologically affected by this, your senior status, leave the bench. Let somebody else handle it. And to talk about this being the worst affront in your 37 years, let me tell you something, Royce. There were individuals in the gallery of the House of Representatives, Puerto Rican nationalists, separatists, who shot 5 members of the House of Representatives, 1 in the chest. 5. And the Democrat Party, whether it was Carter or Clinton and Obama, pardoned them, gave them clemency. What do you think about that, Royce? That seems to me to be a lot more violent than anything we saw. Insurrection, Royce, really? How many of the people you're putting in prison were not only armed, had bullets in the chambers, and used them? None. None. And Royce, nobody is defending the violence that took place, but most of the people you're throwing in prison didn't commit violent acts. So please don't start attacking Elise Stefanik without naming her and me and other people because you're offended. Then get the hell out of your courtroom, leave the bench, run for office, give a speech, show up at CNN and MSNBC. Because your conduct, as far as I'm concerned, Royce, is beneath the level of the professionalism that is required of a federal judge. If you can't handle it, then move on. For 2 months in a row. 2 months in a row. The federal courthouse in Portland, Oregon was under attack. At some point it was breached. They pushed back. It was firebombed. It was hit with Molotov cocktails. It was hit with bricks and rocks, frozen water bottles. The federal courthouse in Portland, Oregon, for 60 straight days, God knows how many police officers were injured. They even used these laser lights. Some of these police officers had permanent damage to their eyes, to their retinas. Is Royce Lamberth even aware of this? That's not called a day of insurrection. The federal judiciary was under attack that day. Or how about the attempt to breach the walls of the White House when Donald Trump was there? 55 Secret Service personnel were injured. 55! Donald Trump had to be brought to the bunker, the nuclear bunker under the White House. The church across the street, the historic church, St. John's, was badly damaged. The Reagan Institute was badly damaged. The kosher restaurant down there was almost destroyed. In the park, Lafayette Park, monuments were graffitied. Is he aware of this? Is he or not? And your job, not just you, Judge Lamberth, all you judges, is to take each case as they come. The facts as they come, apply the law, stop giving your damn speeches about what happened that day. That's not your job. Your job is to make sure justice occurs with that defendant who's standing in front of you. Not to make a statement. And it's not just him. Folks, you have no idea of these relationships that I've had over the course of decades, 40 years. This is one of them with Judge Lamberth. When I appeared before him, he couldn't be more professional. We were friends. But I'm sorry, I got to draw the line. I got to draw it somewhere. And these judges who keep making these political speeches, somebody has to respond to them. It might as well be me.